Now, as we told you, President Trump announced Friday he was commuting the sentence of Roger Stone, just days before Stone was set to start a 3-plus-year prison sentence stemming from Robert Mueller's Russian witch hunt. Remember, Stone was convicted of process crimes relating to 2017 and statements he made to House lawmakers. In other words, lying before Congress. Adam Schiff presiding, the biggest liar in Congress. Now, neither the Schiff show nor Robert Mueller produced one bit of evidence that Stone was working with anybody colluding with Russia. And by the way, as the White House press secretary explained, quote, these charges were the product of recklessness born of frustration and malice. Joining us now, Roger Stone, first TV interview, and his attorney, David Schoen. I would like to say to you, Roger, well, I'm glad you had your sentence commuted and you're not headed to prison this week. There's a part of me that is also very angry and very concerned for the country based on the entire handling of your matter. Why don't I just let you say it in your own words, what this has been like for you?
Well, this is the most horrible experience you can have because I see immediately why 99% of the people who choose to plead not guilty and go to trial lose. When you're up against the horrific and deep-pocketed resources of the federal government and these really sadistic, arrogant, politically motivated prosecutors, I had a biased judge, I had a stacked jury, I had a corrupt jury forewoman. As my friend Tucker Carlson said, my trial was over before it started. When you go through something like this, Sean, you find out who your real friends are and who the people are who really never were your friends. You have been a tremendous friend. You have done a great job of keeping people informed. But I have to really single out your Fox News colleague, Tucker Carlson. He took up the cudgels early. He stayed on this case with every twist and turn, wasn't afraid to take on the judge, laid out the jury question. It encouraged me when I got discouraged. He's a man of incredible loyalty, and he's a great friend. He may be the best friend a man can have. So my hat's off to him. And also Congressman Matt Gaetz from Florida, who I hope to live long enough to see in the White House. He was a great friend who never gave up in trying to make sure everybody understood the injustice that I had been through. But so many others, Bernie Carrick, the former New York police commissioner, and Charlie Kirk, Reverend Franklin Graham, pastors Mark Burns and Daryl Scott, Randy Coggins, a dynamic young evangelist from Florida, the entire Flynn family, General Mike Flynn, a man who's still being persecuted. My hat's off to all of them because they helped me and my wife and my family through the scariest, most difficult process of you can imagine. But above all, I must tell you, Sean, based on advice from you and Reverend Graham and the two pastors I mentioned, I really want to thank God because I was literally hours away from being sent to a COVID-infested prison in violation of the current Bureau of Prisons and DOJ policies, in violation of every precedent in the country where people going to jail or in jail were asking for compassionate release, and in every case, it was granted. I'm 67 years old. I've had a lifelong problem of respiratory problems. I was facing what I really believed was a near-death sentence. So you, and particularly Tucker, Matt Gaetz, and everybody I named, my heart goes out to you. I'm deeply, deeply grateful. But more than anything else, I'm grateful for God, because as you told me, if I would rededicate my life to Christ, if I would be reborn, I can remember it like it was yesterday. And your advice was as solid as can be. You said God will never desert you. He will never abandon you. He will protect you if you confess your sins and you walk in his way. And I have done my very best to do that.
Let me go through, and I want you to tell people, because there's this whole system of justice where you can use Sammy the Bull Gravano as the biggest case in point. He commits 19 murders, and he's given a get-out-of-jail-free card in a witness protection program because he flipped on John Gotti. All right, put that aside for a second. In your case, did Mueller and his team offer anything of value? Your freedom, for example, I would argue is of great value if you would say certain things they wanted you to say, whether they were true or not?
Well, in the beginning of the case, Sean, I don't think that was their intention. But as they got closer and closer to having to issue the Mueller report, and they realized that they had no Russian collusion, because there was no Russian collusion, it was a hoax, on July 24th, Jeannie Rhee, who was heading my prosecution within the Mueller team, that's extraordinary in itself, because she previously represented Hillary Clinton and the Clinton Foundation in the illegal email server case and the missing email case. So she had a clear bias. She was a maximum donor to both of Hillary's presidential campaigns. By the way, she has all the charm of a North Korean prison guard. She made it very clear to one of my lawyers, after a hearing she asked to see him privately, that if I would remember certain phone conversations I had with candidate Trump, if I would come clean, if I would confess, that they might be willing to, recommend leniency to the judge. Perhaps I wouldn't even serve any jail time. And I didn't have to think about it very long. I said, absolutely not. There was no circumstance under which I would bear false witness against the president. I was just not willing to lie. Now, in the last 2 days, when I said that, people said, you see, Stone had the goods on Trump, and he traded his silence for a commutation. That is patently false. I never said that. I never implied that. What I said has been consistent, that I would not lie against my friend of 40 years so they could use it for impeachment. They wanted me to be the ham in their ham sandwich because they knew the Mueller report, particularly on Russia, was a dud. It was a goose egg. They had nothing, and they were hoping that I would recharacterize my phone calls. I think these phone calls that were plea bargain induced claims by Michael Cohen and Rick Gates, for which they could never find any corroboration, and I simply refused to do it.
Let me go to you, David Schoen, and I'll ask you both the same question simultaneously. Roger, I think I've known you well enough over the years. You're a fighter. Your instincts are going to be, okay, now I'm going to go back, and maybe if you go back and you appeal this and you open up this case again, I would argue right now you're home free. And I think that I saw nothing but corruption in that courtroom by that judge and that jury, and not giving you another trial. David, I would say that if you go forward with that, you are now putting Roger's life back in jeopardy again. And I don't know. I don't have any faith in that system. I don't have any faith in that judge. I don't have any faith with that jury. Nobody on this case, do I believe, is honorable here.
Yeah, I think you're right. You raise a very interesting question and a perplexing one. We have to sit down and make a decision as to whether to go forward with the appeal, knowing that a win in this case, and there should be a win, classic Fifth and Sixth Amendment violations, would go right back to the same judge and a courtroom of injustice. Let me just say this to you. This commutation is a great tribute to President Trump for 3 reasons. He sends the message that the Mueller team was rotten to the core from its inception. When Mr. Mueller picked Andrew Weissman
as his right... I've been saying that for over 3 years, David.
Screaming it. You don't pick an investigation that involves the President of the United States, requires integrity. You don't pick an Andrew Weissman, who's the most ethically bankrupt prosecutor I've ever come across. I represent 2 men right now, Mr. Arena, Mr. Sessa, who were wrongfully convicted with him. You talked about making deals with witnesses. He lied about those deals. He was mentioned specifically by a judge for his misconduct. So that's one thing. The Mueller team was rotten to the core, filled with partisans. Number 2, an unfair trial. The president recognized that. The judge denied the entire defense theory. Mr. Stone wasn't allowed to mention on social media or make a defense theory that in any way challenged the integrity of the Mueller team. Unprecedented. And thirdly, the president saved a life here because the judge's decision on denying a surrender extension when COVID was in the prison and with these health conditions goes against all authority in the country on this issue, as did the Court of Appeals.
You know, I'm listening to your attorney, and I know David a long time, Roger. I've known you a long time. And you're a character. Everybody knows you're a character. But that's not about you as a character. I would want a fair and impartial jury for everybody. I wouldn't want any Democrat or liberal to have 29 guys in tactical gear over a process crime. I wouldn't want a gag order on any American. They should have a right to speak out in their own defense. I wouldn't want a jury foreperson as prejudiced or a judge that went along with this crap. My question to you is, we've seen this now with Papadopoulos. We've now seen this with Paul Manafort. We saw it with General Flynn. We've seen it with you. I'll be honest, Roger. I believe in our Constitution. I believe in our rule of law. I think I read a lot about equal justice and application of our laws. I don't see any of this in any of these cases. I see a travesty of injustice. You've been a part of it. I don't know. I'm losing faith in the system, Roger.
Well, you have a good reason to. I mean, you examine the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals, where I had to file a last-minute emergency appeal of Judge Jackson's rule sending me to jail. She ignored all the legal precedents in that. She ignored my health conditions. She ignored the conditions at the prison at that time. And she ignored the current policies of DOJ and the BOP. Now, you would have thought that that would have been reversed in the appeals court, but they ruled for her 3-0. I'm afraid this is a fixed system. Above all, though, I guess I'd have to say the most important thing here is the courageousness of the president's act. I know there were many, many, many people who told him in an election year, don't do this. Let Roger Stone wait maybe for a pardon after the election. Sean, I don't think I would have lived that long, not with my asthmatic condition, not with now 60 COVID-19 cases in that prison. So I have deep, deep affection for Donald Trump because I've known him 40 years. He's a man of great justice and fairness. He's a man of enormous courage. I knew he would take some shots for this, but I think most people, most fair-minded people, understand he saved my life, and at least on paper, he gave me a chance to fight for vindication. Now, I'm not a fool. I'm going to be guided by the advice of my lawyers. As I understand it, if my conviction is overturned by the appeals court, I'd be back in front of Judge Jackson. Judge Jackson issued an incredible ruling that said that I could not raise misconduct by the special counsel, the FBI, the DOJ, or any member of Congress, Adam Schiff. So, I mean, if that were in place in General Flynn's case, we still wouldn't know how he was railroaded. We still wouldn't know about the political motivations behind taking him down. So I've got to become convinced I can get a fair second trial, because I certainly didn't get a fair first trial.
You had a gag order and you weren't allowed to even put on your defense. You wanted to put on a defense. They denied you that right. Then, of course, we have the whole jury foreperson. This is on top of the raid, pre-dawn raid. By the way, I'm sure you probably called CNN, Roger, and said that. I do not believe you can get any fair trial in that courtroom or that system. I don't know. I think that probably every fiber of your being would want to be to fight to get the acquittal you believe you should get. But I don't know if I'd give you that advice, because I don't think there's anybody in that courtroom that is fair, Roger.
Well, and as you point out, Comey, Clapper, Brennan, McCabe, Strzok, Page, Rosenstein, Mueller himself, Hillary, they all lied under oath, but they lied about material things, consequential things. Therefore, they had an intent and a motive to lie. I was charged with making misstatements that were innocuous. And if you look at it very carefully, it's very clear what happened here. And that is that Aaron Zelinsky, the corrupt prosecutor, the dirtiest of Mueller's dirty cops, other than Weissman, shared the fruits of the surveillance into me with Adam Schiff so that he could fashion gotcha questions, most of them of no consequence. And then after the setup, in which I appeared voluntarily before the House Intelligence Committee, Schiff, in violation of House rules, shared the classified testimony with Mr. Zelinsky so Mr. Weissman could fashion a very contorted and contrived indictment. Yet today you have Mueller and Schiff and Rosenstein back to saying Stone was in cahoots with Russian intelligence. This is nonsense. They're all the way back to the Russia
Was there ever
lie.
any evidence of
They
that,
know it's
Roger?
false,
There was
but
not.
they keep
Was there any evidence ever given of any contact with any Russian intelligence?
Here's what there was. There was evidence that I had a Twitter direct message exchange with Guccifer Point 2, a persona. But if you look at when that happened, it happened long after WikiLeaks had published all their material. And if you look at the actual content of the exchange, it's benign. There's no collusion. There's no collaboration. And thirdly, we don't even know that Guccifer 2.0 is a Russian asset. Just because John Brennan says something's true, he said the Steele dossier was real, too. So just because they assert something doesn't mean it's true. I could have proved at trial, using forensic evidence and expert testimony from fellows like Bill Binney, former SNA counterintelligence expert, and Ray McGovern, that no one hacked the DNC, that there was no online hack of the DNC, that the information based on the download times was downloaded to a portable disk and taken out the back door. But I wasn't allowed to present that defense because Judge Jackson would not allow it.
Roger, I want to believe in our system of justice, and in a way it worked, I guess, in the end with the president's commutation. But what happened to you, what happened to Papadopoulos, what happened to General Flynn, what happened to Manafort, what happened to the President of the United States, what happened to Carter Page, we're going to lose this country if this happens again. It's the biggest abuse of power corruption scandal in our history. Glad you're free tonight, Roger. We wish you Godspeed. And David, thank you for the great work you do as his attorney.